A statement from Home Secretary Yvette Cooper addressed the tragic attack in Southport that resulted in the deaths of Bebe King, Elsie Dot Stancombe, and Alice Da Silva Aguiar. Cooper described the attack as horrendous, barbaric, and cowardly, offering condolences to the families and commending the strength of the Southport community. She also praised the efforts of law enforcement and emergency responders in seeking justice. Before we dive in, make sure to like and subscribe. Have a watch this.
I now call the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'll make a statement on the Southport murders. None of us will ever forget the events of 29th of July. The school holidays had just started. Little girls were at a dance class to have fun, to dance, to sing. A moment of joy turned into the darkest of nightmares. And we think especially of three little girls, Elsie Dot Stancombe, Bebe King, and Alice Da Silva Aguiar. Their precious smiles and the dreams that their families had. And we think of their families' agony to have that future so brutally destroyed. They are in all our hearts and prayers, as are those who survived the attack but who live with the physical and emotional scars. And nothing will ever take away their trauma and loss, and we will ensure that they receive the support and care they need in the years to come. We think too of the police and first responders who ran into that scene of unspeakable horror. The courage they showed and the lives they saved is public service at its very best. Yesterday, Axel Rudakubana pled guilty to all charges. He stands responsible for one of the most barbaric crimes in our country's history. The most vile and cowardly attack on little children who could never defend themselves, carried out in the most horrific and traumatic way. The CPS has described him as a young man with a sickening and sustained interest in death and violence, who has shown no sign of remorse. On Thursday before sentencing, the prosecution will set out what happened that day and the nature of those offences. But, Mr. Speaker, now that the conviction has been secured, the families, the people of Southport and the entire country need answers about how this horrendous attack could ever have happened. The government has been constrained in what we could say up to this point about Rudakubana's past to avoid prejudicing any jury trial in line with all the normal rules of our British justice systems, because nothing was more important than securing justice. But now we can start to lay out that background. Multiple different agencies were in contact with Rudakubana and knew about his history of violence. He was referred 3 times to Prevent between December 2019 and April 2021, when aged 13 and 14. Between October 2019 and May 2022, Lancashire Police responded to 5 calls from his home address about his behaviour. He was referred repeatedly to the multi-agency safeguarding hub. He had contact with Children's Social Care, the Early Help Service, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. He was convicted of a violent assault against another child at school and was referred to the Youth Offending Team. He was excluded from one school. He had long periods of absence from another. All those agencies had contact with him. Yet between them, they completely failed to identify the terrible danger that he posed. How did he fall through so many gaps? It is just unbearable to think that something more could and should have been done. So there are grave questions about how this network of agencies failed to identify and act on the risks. There were so many signs of how dangerous he had become, yet the action against him was far too weak. So families need the truth about why the system failed to tackle his violence for so many years. That is why we are setting up an independent public inquiry. Like the Angelini inquiry into Wayne Couzens, it will begin work initially on a non-statutory basis so that it can move quickly into action, but with statutory powers added later as required. We will set out the terms of reference and appoint the chair once we have consulted the coroner and given the families the opportunity to comment. And in addition to examining what went wrong in this horrific case, I am also asking the inquiry to consider the wider challenge of rising youth violence and extremism. Because I have been deeply disturbed at the number of cases involving teenagers drawn into extremism, serious violence and terrorism, including Islamist extremism, far-right extremism, mixed and confused ideology, and the obsession with violence and gore. There has been a threefold increase in under-18s investigated for involvement in terrorism in just 3 years. 162 people were referred to prevent.
What's your thoughts on this? Let us know. The Home Secretary highlighted that while justice has been served with Axel Rudakubana's guilty plea, there are still pressing questions about how he was able to commit such horrific acts despite prior contact with several state agencies. Cooper pointed out that Rudakubana had been referred to the PREVENT program multiple times and had interactions with police, courts, and social services. She stressed that these agencies failed to identify the risks he posed and called for a public inquiry to investigate how such a dangerous individual was able to fall through the cracks of the system. If you think this video has helped inform you, make sure to like, subscribe, and take care. Goodbye.